Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we are going to unpack one of the most mesmerizing achievements in modern engineering. We're taking a chronological journey, literally following a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from the exact second it lifts off the pad all the way to its precision recovery on an autonomous drone ship right in the middle of the ocean. By diving into the actual launch telemetry and mission milestones, we're going to break down exactly how this incredible feat of aerospace reusability is actually pulled off. So get ready, because we are following this flight from Cape Canaveral straight to the edge of space and all the way back down again.
Okay, let's dive right into this. It's a question that honestly sounds like the setup to a ridiculous sci-fi joke, right? How do you parallel park a 15-story rocket falling from space? But as the data from this Falcon 9 launch shows us, it is not science fiction at all anymore. It's a routine reality. To pull off a successful launch and recovery, the vehicle and its flight computers have to execute a flawless, insanely intricately timed sequence of events. They're battling intense aerodynamic stress, blistering heat, and massive gravitational forces, all while trying to steer this giant metal cylinder back to a tiny floating target. So let's look at exactly how this mechanical marvel accomplishes the whole shebang, step by step.
All right, starting us off with Phase 1, liftoff to maximum stress.
So as the Falcon 9 lifts off from Space Launch Complex 40, you might think it just floors the gas and accelerates constantly. But actually, about 30 seconds into the flight, the computers deliberately throttled down those powerful M1D engines to prepare for something called max Q. This is the point of maximum aerodynamic stress. You see, as the rocket climbs, two opposing things are happening at the exact same time. The atmospheric density is rapidly decreasing because the air is getting thinner, but the speed of the rocket is massively increasing. Max Q is that precise mathematical intersection where the increasing velocity outpaces the thinning air, and that creates the absolute highest level of mechanical stress on the rocket's structure. It's literally pushing the physical limits of the vehicle. So throttling down just before hitting this point ensures the rocket doesn't, well, tear itself apart. Once it's safely through max Q, the engines throttle right back up.
Moving right along to Phase 2, staging and orbit insertion. Having survived the thickest, soupiest parts of the atmosphere, the vehicle has essentially done the heavy lifting of escaping Earth's immediate gravitational pull. But to get the payload where it actually needs to go, the Falcon 9 now has to split itself in two. This builds into an incredible, rapid-fire three-step sequence. First up, we have MECO, which stands for Main Engine Cutoff. This is the exact moment when all 9 Merlin engines on that first stage shut down simultaneously. Immediately following that is Step 2, Stage Separation. Pneumatic pushers fire, physically pushing the first and second stages apart. Then, practically in the same breath, Step 3 kicks in, SES-1, or Second Engine Start 1. The second stage's MVAC engine, which is specially optimized for the vacuum of space, ignites to push the payload toward nominal orbit insertion. And this entire three-step sequence happens in just a matter of seconds.
Once we're in the vacuum of space, about 10 seconds after that second engine starts, the protective payload fairings at the very top of the rocket are jettisoned. Because there's no more atmosphere up there to protect the payload from, carrying that extra weight is simply no longer necessary. But check out the flight numbers here on the slide. Fairing half 1 is flying for its 36th time, and fairing half 2 for its 24th time. That is wild. These aren't just discarded sheets of metal that burn up. They are retrieved from the ocean and evolved through multiple mission cycles. This drastic reuse of hardware saves an absolute massive amount of money, and it really just proves the sheer scale of modern aerospace reusability.
Next up is Phase 3, navigating the atmospheric return. So, while the second stage continues safely into orbit, our hero, the massive first stage booster, is now falling back toward Earth. It's heading straight for the Atlantic Ocean. Think about it. It's essentially a giant 15-story empty fuel tank hurtling downward at hypersonic speeds, and it desperately needs a braking strategy to survive the intense heat and friction of atmospheric reentry. Right around the 6.5-minute mark, it executes what's called an entry burn. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what's going on. It's just like pumping the brakes on a car to slow down. Hitting the Earth's thick lower atmosphere at those speeds without braking would add absolutely catastrophic structural stress to the vehicle. So by firing its engines again, the rocket actively reduces those re-entry forces, which fundamentally allows the first stage to survive intact so it can be recovered.
But there is a fascinating visual side effect to this intense braking maneuver. During the entry burn, the Falcon 9 is firing its engines in the exact direction it's moving. This means the rocket is literally flying straight through its own superheated engine exhaust gases. And because the Falcon 9 uses a carbon-based fuel, flying through this exhaust deposits a really thick layer of carbon soot all over the outer skin of the vehicle. With every single subsequent flight, that soot just builds up a little bit more. So when you see a Falcon 9 booster on the pad that looks heavily charred, dark, and super weathered, you are actually looking at the visual badge of its flight history. That is the signature look of a heavily flight-proven machine.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the falling booster actually steers itself. It relies on two primary pieces of hardware. First, positioned right up near the top of the first stage, are 4 hypersonic grid fins. These are the primary aerodynamic control surfaces. As the rocket is dropping, these fins pivot and slice through the air to physically steer the vehicle toward the landing zone. Second, if you ever watch a launch and you see those little white puffs shooting out from the sides of the rocket, those are bursts of cold nitrogen gas. These gas thrusters are absolutely crucial for attitude control. They help the flight computers meticulously adjust the rocket's orientation and tilt as it drops through the sky.
And that brings us to the grand finale, Phase 4, the final landing burn.
Okay, the entry burn is complete, the grid fins are actively steering through the lower atmosphere, and the autonomous drone ship is waiting out there in the Atlantic Ocean. The flight computers are now transitioning into terminal guidance. But before we see the touchdown, consider the number 29 on your screen. This specific booster, the one executing this terminal guidance, is flying for its 29th time. Let that sink in. This isn't some early prototype or development test. This is a battle-tested workhorse of modern spaceflight operations. This single booster has previously carried astronauts on NASA's Crew 6 mission, it's launched critical national security payloads like USF-124, and it's hauled 23 different Starlink missions into orbit. Its deep history of reuse perfectly contextualizes why this whole recovery process is so vital to modern aerospace economics.
And finally, the climax of the entire journey. We're in the last minute of flight, and if you watch the telemetry readouts, you see a drastic, rapid decrease in both speed and altitude. The call out for landing burn startup echoes through mission control. This is the final engine firing. As the booster hovers just above the deck of the ship, those 4 landing legs successfully deploy outward. Moments later, the engines shut down, and touchdown is confirmed on the autonomous spaceport drone ship, wonderfully named A Shortfall of Gravitas. The 29th flight of this booster ends with a perfect, dead-center soft landing in the middle of the ocean.
And that incredible reality leaves us with this provocative thought. With rockets successfully parallel parking themselves on ocean drone ships time and time again, literally turning the vacuum of space into a routine commuter route, what limits are left to break? We've walked through the intense aerodynamic stresses of Max Q, the rapid-fire choreography of staging, and the brilliant engineering of entry burns and grid fins. What was once considered completely impossible is now just another Tuesday in aerospace engineering. I really hope this explainer has illuminated the incredible technical reality behind reusable spaceflight for you. Keep questioning, keep looking up, and thank you so much for learning with me today.